Hey friends, welcome back. We're on the second part of our series on moods and emotions. So, have you ever heard of road rage? Of course you have. If you have a driver's license, you've probably experienced personally. You've probably been in the car with someone who has road raged while driving, or maybe you've been in the car or been driving or whatever when someone else in another car has road raged towards you. If you've never experienced road rage, maybe you've encountered hallway rage. I totally just made that term up. But hallway rage would be what happens when someone bumps into you between classes and makes you drop your phone. In turn, you go off on somebody. Hallway rage is real. On the road or in the hallway, we all know that kind of rage. Even if you don't yell at someone or act rudely in the lunch line, you probably know the feeling of that kind of rage inside of you. Most of us don't actually call it rage or even call it anger, but you get the idea. Maybe you'd say that you're frustrated. When your sister shrinks your favorite shirt in the wash, you aren't mad, you're frustrated. Or when your stepdad reminds you how you could get grounded for the weekend, you aren't angry, you're frustrated. When that one kid acts like they're superior to basically everyone, you get frustrated enough to hope they face plant in front of everybody, right? You know what I'm talking about. Why? Because we don't like to think of ourselves as angry. But let's be honest. Is there a difference between being mad and being frustrated? Is there a difference between road rage and road frustration? So, this is the second in our series of emotions or the vibe inside. I wish that didn't rhyme, but it does. So, we're also talking about keeping those vibes or those emotions from controlling us. And one of the emotions that shows up for everyone and tries to take over is anger. The thing about anger is it doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it means yelling at someone or losing your temper. That's how we normally think of it. But sometimes it means giving someone the silent treatment. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes when someone is mad at you, they're not saying anything. In fact, sometimes that's way worse because maybe you're really good at giving someone the silent treatment. Not only is it a way for you to process your anger, but it's also a way for you to control the situation. You hold the power because you withhold the words. Even more complicated though, not all anger is bad. There's anger we feel when we see injustices, when we see things like certain groups of people that are treated unfairly, or causes that we care about that are not being taken seriously, or racism, or people who don't have clean water, or people who don't take care of the planet. When we see things happening in the world that aren't right, it's a good thing to get angry. Jesus got super angry when people were mistreated, like flipping furniture kind of angry. So it isn't always bad to be angry. In fact, sometimes anger is constructive. It moves us toward positive action. But then other times it's destructive. It moves us toward regret and it hurts people. And what are we supposed to do with that? Either way, anger is a powerful emotion. The question is, what do we do with it? And how do we keep destructive anger from taking over and bossing us around? We're going to look at a passage from the book of James. James was the brother of Jesus. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. But when Jesus was alive and he walked the earth, James was not a follower of Jesus. It was only after Jesus was crucified and came back to life that James was convinced that Jesus was the real thing. Eventually, James became a leader in the early church. He lived in Jerusalem and he wrote his letter primarily to Jewish Christians. It's a letter full of wisdom. And in the section we're going to look at today, James offers a principle that may sound a little too simple at first, but I want you to hang in there because if you and I can learn to do this, it'll change everything. James starts by saying this: Who is wise and understanding among you? We hear the word wise a lot, but we may not really focus on what it means. Wise is different from smart. You can be born smart, but wisdom is earned. If you're wise, you take what you've experienced in life and you learn from it. You understand that life is connected and that actions have consequences. And James is asking how many of you guys get that? If you do get it, here's what I have to say next. He continues, let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. So James is making a connection here. He's saying that wise people are humble. And what does humility look like? Well, it starts with a proper view of yourself. You don't see yourself as an exception to the rules. You don't think the world revolves around you and your desires. You don't think that you deserve better treatment than everyone else. Or you don't see that everyone else has a means to an end that you want. James is saying that wise people don't do these things. He continues, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Harbor basically means to let something hang around or stick around. If you let stuff stay with you that makes you think that you're better or more important, don't deny it. Call it out. Don't pretend to be fine. And then James says this, for where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. Let's say it a different way. When pride or arrogance gets lodged inside of us, it comes out in our actions. I know that's not exactly great news, but he doesn't leave us hanging after that. A couple of verses later, he asks, what causes fights and quarrels among you? I bet I could stop right there, and every one of you would have an answer to that question. Parents with unrealistic rules causes quarrels among us, or younger siblings that won't stop being annoying, or friends that don't text back, or a stepdad that acts like he's always right, or maybe even people with obnoxious TikTok or Instagram accounts. Whatever it is, we all have an answer for outside of us that causes problems among us. But y'all, James is not buying it. He answers his own question of what causes fights and quarrels among you by saying, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Ouch. In other words, your mom may drive you crazy and your little brother may be annoying, but what causes the arguments? It's not them, it's you. Or more specifically, what's in you. And this is a big deal because as long as we think that the problem is someone else, someone else's behavior, someone else's character, someone else's mistake, we'll never deal with the anger problem inside of us. We think the problem is people not doing things our way. But James is saying that the problem is that we want to get our way. But as long as we think the problem is outside of us, we'll never take care of what's inside of us. You may disagree, because maybe you feel like the things you want are things that have to be earned. Things like freedom, respect, trust, and responsibility. And when you don't get the things that you feel like you've earned, it doesn't seem fair. And you're right. But James isn't talking about what's fair and what isn't. He's saying that if you want to get to the root of your frustration and anger, you need to be willing to admit that the problem is in you. The problem is when you don't get what you think you deserve. So what do? Well, we have to change the script, y'all. When other people aren't acting like we think they should, or we aren't getting what we think we deserve, we have to change what we say. Instead of saying, he's being selfish, she's being annoying, they're being rude, we have to say, you know what the problem is? I'm not getting what I want. I understand that this sounds kind of terrible, but I'm telling you, when you start doing this, guys, relationships change. Your frustration levels change. Your anger changes. Why? Because you're no longer looking to other people as the reason why you feel the way that you feel. As long as you are looking to other people as the reason for feeling the way that you do, other people have all the control over your emotions. On the other hand, when you start admitting that the problem is that you're not getting what you want, you get the control back. And isn't that what we all want when it comes to our emotions? We want the control. James is making the point that as long as you think the problem is outside of you and that it's somebody else's fault, you will always feel like you get a free pass to act however you want. Why? Because you can say that you didn't do anything wrong. You can avoid ownership and responsibility. You can look at others and say, they made me do it. They made me act that way. They made me say it. They left me no choice. But James is saying, no, sir. If you did that thing or said that thing that was angry, mean, or hurtful, it was because it was in you to say it or do it. Of course, there are circumstances that should upset you, like when you're treated unfairly by a sibling or a friend or a parent. But imagine if, in the middle of feeling your anger and frustration, you were able to say, part of the problem, maybe not the whole problem, but at least part of the problem, is that I'm not getting what I want. Just being willing to say that out loud helps you to keep yourself from being controlled by anger or frustration. Owning what you can own in the problem keeps your anger and frustration from driving you and owning you. And no matter who you are, that is a good thing. So based on what we've talked about here today, here's my question for you. What's your relationship with anger? Do you control it, or does it control you? If I were to ask your coach, your mom, dad, step-parents, brother, sister, teammates, classmates, friends, whatever it is, what would they say about you? Because if anger is controlling you in any of those relationships, then it's controlling you too much. And the only way to beat it, according to James, is with humility. And humility says, it's not all my fault, but I'm going to own my part of it. And my part of it has to do with me not getting what I want. So when you feel anger or frustration or whatever you want to call it rising up, when you're in that disagreement with a parent, step-parent, coach, friend, sibling, whatever, ask yourself, what am I not getting that is causing this anger? Because even if you aren't the whole problem, humility means recognizing that you are part of the problem. And when you learn how to recognize that, the emotion of anger begins to lessen its control over you. The good news is that for those of us who are Jesus followers, we follow someone who has led the way in this. Jesus said no to getting his way. In fact, the Apostle Paul wrote about this very thing when he talked about Jesus. In his letter to the Philippians, Paul says, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Jesus had every reason and every right to get his own way, but he didn't. He gave up what he wanted so that we could know how valuable we are in God's sight. Paul starts this passage about Jesus and his humility by saying this, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love. Paul wrote that in his second chapter to the Philippians. But did you catch that? He tells us to be like Christ. And then he tells us what Christ is like, humble, when he had every reason not to be. Jesus surrendered his way when he could have easily fought for it. Following the example is how we keep anger from controlling us. Think of it this way. Because of Jesus, anger doesn't have to be the boss of you. I really believe, y'all, that following Jesus makes life better. I really do. Because when you follow him and you ask him, he will nudge you away from self-centeredness, from arrogance, and from pride, and move you towards humility and love for others. And as that happens, you will find that anger no longer has the hold on you that it did before. And less powerful anger is a win for everyone. I want you to begin imagining today what life would look like if anger didn't control you. None of us will get this right completely all of the time. I don't. You won't either. But I want you to really think about it. In your personal circumstances, what would it look like for you to choose wisdom and humility over anger and to really be like Jesus? I challenge you to do that today. I love you guys. I miss you. Look forward to